The 2017 season has come to an end, so that means that our season has come to an end because we obviously did not make the playoffs. The Atlanta Braves finished the 2017 campaign at 76-86, which is 4th place in the NL East. The only team worse than us was the Philadelphia Phillies. Now, I know this is probably like an abrupt ending to the season because you guys are used to 3-game episodes and then also a prospect profile each month of the season that I do, and I only did 2-game episodes for the month of September, and then the season ended. Well, that's pretty much just because, well, one, we're not a competing team. There's really no reason to show 3 games. I was probably only going to show 2 games to begin with anyways in this month of September. And both of our playoff teams were out of the or both of our minor league teams, I should say, were out of the playoffs by the time September came around. So there was no minor league games to play with these prospect profiles. So 2 games, and then the season's over. So let's hop into the season recap and then on to the off-season. And you can see on your screen that the Marlins won the NL East. Around the rest of the league, there was the NL Central, which was won by the defending champion Cubs. The NL West was the San Francisco Giants, despite it being an odd season. And then AL East was the Boston Red Sox. The AL Central was the Cleveland Indians, and the AL West was the Seattle Mariners. And now time for the monthly Freddie Freeman recap. This is the end of season Freddie Freeman recap. So Freddie Freeman finished the season with a .315 average, which is 1st place in the National League. That means he won the batting title. We'll get on to that a bit later on in the episode. He had 181 hits, which was also 1st in the National League. So he had the best average, and he had the most hits. And he was also 2nd in the league in home runs with 42, only behind Nolan Arenado. Somehow Arenado and Freeman overtook Giancarlo Stanton for home runs. He had a .407 OBP, which was 2nd behind Stanton, a .593 slugging percentage, which was also 2nd behind Stanton, and then his exactly 1,000 OPS was also 2nd in the National League. Ender Inciarte also had a great season for the Braves. He was 10th in average with a .291 average, and with his 174 hits, were 6th in the National League. As far as how the team overall did, the team ratings were average. They had a team .264 average, which was actually 6th in the entire MLB, which is pretty good. Pretty darn good to have a 6th average. Team had no problem hitting for average. It was just a matter of other things. That's why they didn't play well. Their runs being one of them, 16th in the major leagues for runs. Definitely got to improve on that next season. 7th in hits, that's pretty darn good. Not really too much to improve upon there. Home runs, that's the big one. Not really too much power on this team. It was pretty much Freddie Freeman, nobody else. So we were 26th in home runs. And then, like I keep mentioning, stolen bases are usually a big part of the teams that I like to play with. Tied for 18th is not where I'd like to see this team be, but as this team starts being built and how I'm building the team starts to come along, you'll see that this team does end up being more of a stolen base team, hopefully. Now looking at the players who aren't Freddie Freeman and Ender Inciarte, Dansby Swanson got off to a pretty rough start to the season. He was on a cold streak throughout, I think, like the first 2 months, but he started picking things up. He had a couple good months. He finished the season pretty decently. I definitely like to see him improve on his .241 average, .330 OBP, 9 home runs, 50 RBI, and 12 stolen bases. Home run, RBI, and stolen bases numbers, I don't think those are going to be too different. I think that's a pretty realistic thing to shoot for. He's probably going to be like a 2-hitter. He could probably knock in a few more RBI, possibly be like a 15 home run guy, maybe steal a few bases, but I'm not hating on the 9 home run, 50 RBI, 12 stolen bases. I just like to see him get on base more and hit for more average. Hopefully he can do that in his next season. Marwin Gonzalez, he was acquired from the Astros at the trade deadline, or a little bit before the trade deadline. He finished the year with a .253, .299 average OBP. Definitely not what you like to see there. Anything under 300 OBP is definitely not ideal. But he is a pretty good player, as he did finish with 19 home runs, 62 RBI. I will say the majority of that came with the Astros, as he was like their everyday player for the Astros. But here he was not, and he did not get as much time, so I think he only hit like a couple home runs with us. Adonis Garcia is a guy who started off the season absolutely on fire. He was our 3-hitter. We had Freeman in the 4-hole, and the 3-4 was just dynamic because Garcia and Freeman were just tearing the cover off the ball. Freeman obviously kept that pace the entire year, but Garcia kind of fell off. he fizzled off, but he didn't really fizzle off too much. He's still a quality player, 276 average, 328 OBP is definitely a bit low. But I mean, obviously he's just not a player who walks too much. But I'll take the 276 average, 19 bombs and 75 RBI. Those are solid numbers, and he's probably going to be brought back for this next season. We'll move on to that as we get to the off-season portion. But right now we're going over the numbers. John Ryan Murphy, he had a 292 average, 341 OBP, 9 home runs, 36 RBI. He's going to be the starting catcher next season. He proved himself. I have confidence in him that he is going to be our catcher. Teoscar Hernandez, he was pretty much playing for that right field spot, and he didn't really have the best of seasons in that right field spot. He had the 241 average, 306 OBP, only 4 home runs. He's not a power hitter, so you don't really expect too much there. 19 RBI and 5 stolen bases. Not really too impressive. He's definitely going to be on our team next year. It's just a matter of who we sign in the offseason and if he'll be the starter or if he'll be like a 4th or 5th outfielder. Roberto Perez was the catcher that we traded for from the Indians. He had a 242 average, a 342 OBP, 5 home runs, 19 RBI. He's going to be our backup catcher. There's no doubt about that. He's signed through a few more seasons, so he's going to be the backup catcher. John Ryan Murphy is the starter. The catcher position is set for the next couple seasons. Moving on to our pitching staff, Joe Biagini had a year that was a bit weird. He had a lot of innings pitched. He had a 12-5 win-loss record, but I mean, he is a pitcher. Pitcher wins don't really mean much. It's just, you just kind of get lucky. You get thrown into situations where you get wins. That was his thing, because his 4.97 ERA is definitely not representative of that 12-5 record. Mike Foltynewicz, he was 9-10 with a 4.40 ERA. He had the most innings pitched on the team with that 153.1 innings pitched. R.A. Dickey, he was on the DL for a decent amount of time. He was 8-7 with a 3.87 ERA and a 135 innings pitched. He had a pretty good season. Julio Teheran, 7-6, definitely rebounded from his awful start. He finished the year with a 3.30 ERA, which is definitely more along the lines of what you want to see from Julio Teheran. He finished with 141.2 innings pitched. Bartolo Colon, he was 5-3 with a 3.05 ERA, only 88 and a 2/3 innings pitched. He was injured a lot. He definitely had a great season, but he was just injured and he didn't really get to pitch too much. But whenever he was on the field, he was pretty darn good, especially for a guy who's that old. Aaron Blair, ever since being called up from AAA, he was lights out. He was a great pitcher. 2.71 ERA, only a 3-6 record, but it's pitcher wins, so that's more representative of the team he played for and not his particular ability. His 2.71 ERA, if he can even put up like a 3.5 next year, I'm going to be impressed. So Aaron Blair, he was definitely impressive in 93 innings. Matt Wisler had a couple impressive starts when he first got called up, but he kind of tailed off. He finished 3-9 with a 5.15 ERA. Definitely not what you want to see from him. He might be a starter next year. It'll depend on what we do in the offseason. Glenn Sparkman, same deal. Had a couple good starts to start off. Fizzled off towards the end. He's 3-4 with a 4.59 ERA. He'll probably be in AAA to start the year, depending on who we sign and what goes on in the offseason. Kris Medlen was one of our more consistent relievers. Despite the 3-8 record, he had a 3.09 ERA in 67 innings pitched. Nick Vincent, he's definitely going to be our closer next season. 19 saves, 39 innings pitched, 3 ERA. Some of those stats are with the Seattle Mariners, obviously. Arodys Vizcaíno, he was 2-2 with a 3.51 ERA, 48 and 2/3 innings pitched. And then there's Kyle Crockett, who's going to be our main lefty in the bullpen this year. He was 1-3 with a 4.50 ERA in 40 innings pitched. I'm confident he's going to bounce back from that, but he's definitely going to be our lefty in the pen this year. And now taking a look at the National League and American League awards. In the National League, the MVP was Max Scherzer, which means, obviously, the Cy Young was also Max Scherzer of the Washington Nationals. The batting title, we discussed that, went to Freddie Freeman. Freddie Freeman also won the Gold Glove at first base, and he also won the Silver Slugger at first base as well. Looking at the American League, their MVP was Miguel Cabrera of the Detroit Tigers, and their Cy Young was Corey Kluber of the Cleveland Indians. And speaking of the Indians, they made it to the World Series again, and they lost for back-to-back seasons. So, Cleveland Indians, 2 seasons in a row making it to the World Series, can't get the job done this year, as the San Francisco Giants win the World Series despite it being an odd year. It's not 2018, it's 2017. They win the World Series despite it. They break the odd year curse, or whatever you want to call it. San Francisco Giants are World Series champions. And the two main retirements before we hop into the offseason for the Braves were obviously Bartolo Colon and R.A. Dickey. There was a couple other guys who were just kind of signed to Brian Wilson, James Russell, and Tyler Heineman. I believe that's how you say his last name. They were all just signed to just kind of fill spots in the minor leagues. Wilson and Russell, they had time in the big leagues. Wilson wasn't too good in the big leagues. Russell was, but I mean, it is what it is. He's not exactly a great pitcher. Wasn't planning to bring him back. Not really big deal that he retired. Heineman was just the guy we signed when all the catchers went down with injury, that he was playing in, I believe, AAA to end the season. And now moving on to the good chunk that everybody wants to know about, the re-signings and the free agency of the offseason. So, to start things off with the re-signs, first things first, Nick Vincent was signed to a 2-year deal for $3.1 million over 2 years. Arodys Vizcaíno, another bullpen, $8 million over 3 years. He'll be in our bullpen for the next 3 years. Dansby Swanson, I'm not sure how the arbitration works in this game, because that's definitely not how arbitration works. I mean, he wasn't available. He wasn't under arbitration, so I had to give him a contract. I don't know how that works in this game. It's definitely weird. It's definitely not like it is in OTP, where it just makes a lot more sense how it is in real life. But in this game, it's just, I'm not sure how they do their offseason. So, Dansby Swanson, 2 years, $3 million over 2 years. Aaron Blair was re-signed for $2.5 million over 2 years. He'll be in our rotation next year. Kyle Crockett, our lefty, he was re-signed for $2.2 million over 2 years. John Ryan Murphy, definitely going to be our starting catcher this next season. He was re-signed to $1.6 million over 2 years. Teoscar Hernandez was signed to a depth contract over 2 years, $1.2 million. Kris Medlen, he was re-signed for $2 million over 1 year. He'll definitely be in our bullpen this year. He was very good this year, or last season, you could say, and he'll be brought back in another setup spot in the 2018 campaign. And then Adonis Garcia was also signed to a $650,000 contract over 1 year. He's a guy, another one. I'm not sure why he's not available for arbitration. He only has like 2.5 or 3 years of Major League service. Definitely not up for free agency. I don't know how that works in this game, but he shouldn't be up for free agency, but he wasn't available for arbitration, so I just gave him a pretty cheap contract because he'll be probably the third baseman this year. It'll depend on what the roster looks like after free agency. As we hop into free agency now, the first thing that we did was we brought back Jaime Garcia. We pulled in Aroldis Chapman. We trade him to a playoff team. They use him for the rest of the season. They did not win the World Series like the Cubs did with Chapman, but he went to free agency. They did not re-sign him. He comes back to the Braves. So Jaime Garcia, he'll be back with the Braves in 2018. And then we also went out and signed another starting pitcher in Jeremy Hellickson. I felt like starting pitching was definitely where we needed to improve upon, especially with Colon and Dickey retiring. I was expecting them to retire. I was expecting starting pitching to be my main point, my main target in free agency, so this is definitely what I wanted to do here. Jeremy Hellickson, $9.8 million over 2 years. He's going to be in rotation next 2 years. That's around like $5 million. It's basically $10 million over 2 years, so it's basically $5 million per year. He had a good 2 years with the Phillies. The past 2 seasons, he had like I think it was like a mid-3, low-3 ERA the past 2 seasons in the NL East, so I think he can still do that with the Braves. It's the same division. He's familiar with it. And he's going to be brought into our team for the 2018 and 2019 seasons as part of our rotation. Taking a look at what's also going around the league in free agency, the Yankees still have the let's sign everybody mentality, so they went out and signed Andrew McCutchen, even though they have an outfield set for the next like 10 years plus probably, with Clint Frazier coming up. They got Aaron Judge in the right field spot. I don't know why I said Andrew. Aaron Judge in the right field spot. Ellsbury signed till he's like 82 years old. But they went out and signed Andrew McCutchen despite all of that. And then the LA Dodgers, being the typical MLB The Show LA Dodgers, just signing all the big names. Yu Darvish going to the Dodgers. Michael Brantley also going to the Dodgers. And at first, I wasn't too sure if I wanted to bring back this guy, but after looking at the roster and going, okay, we need some backup infielders, Marwin Gonzalez, I just called him by his nickname as his first name. Marwin Gonzalez, nickname Margo, has been offered arbitration, so he will be a part of our team next year. He'll be a utility infielder. He can play left and right, I believe, as well. Doesn't say that on his player card, but he can. So he's going to be a utility guy. Also with Sean Rodriguez, who is back. He's not injured. He's going to be in our bench as well, being a utility guy. But an interesting signing we did make, who is a guy who's going to be playing every day, but not the position he played in 2017, is Danny Valencia. Danny Valencia is a guy who we signed to a $3.8 million contract for 1 year, so he's just going to be a spot guy, you know. Hopefully we can get some guys developed to take over a corner outfield spot, because he's going to be playing left field for us. I know he's listed as a first baseman. He's mainly been a first baseman and third baseman in his career. But Danny Valencia, I feel like he can definitely pass as a left fielder. We're going to move Matt Kemp to right, play Valencia in left field. Our corner outfield positions are probably going to take a hit in fielding percentage. Not great out there in the corners. Inciarte can definitely pick up some slack in center field. He's a gold glover, but the corner outfield positions, not the best fielding-wise, but Kemp and Valencia are going to do their jobs as power bats on those corner outfield positions. Definitely Valencia will add to our power, as last year he had 26 bombs and 98 ribbies in 2017, and hopefully he can carry some of that production into our season with the Braves and add some more pop to our lineup, as last year we were definitely missing that pop as Kemp kind of fizzled off at the end of the season, and hopefully Kemp, Freeman, and Valencia can all get some pop added to this lineup this year. Garcia's got some pop in his bat. And we did also make a few other minor league signings for some depth in the minor leagues. I always sign guys who teams are like, we don't want that guy, but I don't know, they just don't want him for some reason. I go out and sign him. They'll probably get a prospect profile, so you won't see who I signed right now, but some of these guys will definitely be getting prospect profiles. But the two guys who are interesting, who are probably right on that edge to being called up, they're like the first two guys on my list if something happens and I need to call up somebody. Taylor Motter from the Seattle Mariners organization. He was signed to a little depth contract, 1 year. He's a utility guy. He's going to be in AAA. His gorgeous blonde flow. He is going to be in our organization. And then Wilfredo Tovar, something like that, from the Cardinals organization he was with. He got called up towards the end of the season. He's going to be a shortstop second baseman. He's a great contact hitter. He's going to hit for a high average. He's got a good throwing arm, but he can't really field that well. He's got decent speed. He's a great bat, but he just can't really field that well, which is definitely not a thing you'd like to see from a shortstop, but his bat definitely makes up for it. He hit .414 in 23 games in 2017. He'll be in AAA for us, but hopefully he hits as well, and maybe he can hit himself into a bench role in the major leagues, or who knows, maybe even if Albies performs poorly, Albies will go back down to AAA, and Tovar will come up and play second base and hit there. But there's definitely a lot of things that could happen, but right now Albies will be our starting second baseman. Tovar will be starting in the minor leagues. So with that being said, that's going to wrap things up here for this edition of the Atlanta Braves franchise, the off-season and the end-of-season recap videos mixed into one. As you see on the screen now, you'll be seeing our roster scroll through at each position. One thing to keep in mind about that is that those positions and levels the guys are at are not final. I just kind of scrolled through that, so if you see some guy, you're like, well, that guy should probably be in AAA. He's probably in AAA. It's just when I recorded that, he wasn't in AAA because I didn't go through and set up all the rosters and make sure everybody was in where I wanted them to be. I also changed a couple guys' positions, so you'll see right now that I have like 5 first basemen in the major league with Freeman, Sean Rodriguez, Danny Valencia, and Marwin Gonzalez. Obviously, Freeman's our first baseman, and Sean Rod, Margo, and Danny Valencia are just kind of utility guys. Valencia is going to be moved to a left field position. I've been your host, Jersey Born, and I'm saying goodbye.